Chapter 11. Bundled up against the crisp air, Peg tried to spark interest in conversations, commenting on the beauty of the red and gold leaves of fall, Ma's receipt for apple custard pie, even the disastrous results of Marcus Hurd's hiding a dead frog in Mrs. Thomas's desk. But Miss Hennessy's thoughts seemed to be far away. Finally, before becoming as silent as her companion, Peg wistfully remembered their previous trip in Miss Hennessy's good humor. Granted, it was terrible that Lewis Parker had been shot, but he was recovering, wasn't he? Nellie had written so. Ma had sent with him a large jar of barley soup, 2 loaves of bread, which should make anyone feel better. Why was Miss Hennessy so deeply depressed? When they were close to River Road, a patrol approached, and for the first time Miss Hennessy sat up smartly. "Don't tell them about Lewis," she ordered Peg, who felt somewhat aggravated that Miss Hennessy hadn't taken it for granted that she was old enough to know better. As the soldiers, none of whom they'd seen before, stopped beside the buggy, Miss Hennessy smiled and handed the patrol leader her letter of safe passage. "My daughter and I are paying a visit to my sister," she said. The soldier seemed less interested in them than the other 2 patrol leaders they met. "What's in the box?" he asked as he handed back the letter. 2 loaves of bread, a container of barley soup," Miss Hennessy answered. "And the carpet bags?" "A change of clothing." With a wave of his hand, he said, "Go on your way." He rode on, and his men followed, without even looking back to see if Miss Hennessy had obeyed. As they reached River Road, Miss Hennessy pulled the horse's reins to the right. "Aren't we going to your sister's house?" Peg asked. "There's no need to bring you there, Miss Hennessy. I'll take you to the Swensons, pick you up tomorrow afternoon about 3. You won't need me to help take care of Mr. Parker?" For the first time, Miss Hennessy smiled. "No, dear. As I told you and your mother, Nellie wrote Lewis is improving. He'll need rest more than anything else." Peg's heart jumped with delight. She'd be free to spend both days with Danny. A small pang of guilt caused her to say, "Are you sure you won't need me?" "I'm sure." The moment the buggy was halted, Peg, who thanked Miss Hennessy, snatched her small carpet bag and leaped to the ground. When Annie, who had heard the buggy arrive, came out to greet Miss Hennessy, Peg grabbed her around the waist and said, "I can stay until tomorrow afternoon." Remembering her manner, she calmed down enough to add, "If you'll have me, that is." "Course we will," Annie said, "and you'll find that Danny's a bit of a sniffle and a cough, and is tucked into a bit of a mustard plaster on his chest. He would go out in that dreadful rainstorm that blew through here." Peg didn't wait to hear more. She left Annie chatting with Miss Hennessy and ran to the Swensons' house. Peg knew where Danny's room was, and she knew she'd be staying in her old bedroom, so she threw her coat and carpet bag on her bed and raced to Danny's bedroom next door. "We're being attacked," Danny yelled as Peg banged on the closed door and slammed it open at the same time. Peg grinned. "I'm here for 2 days this time." "All of you? What do you mean, all of me?" Danny pushed himself to a sitting position. "You made enough noise for 10 people. I was sure a passel of bushwhackers was after me." Peg made a face as she flounced onto Danny's bed. "Whew, you stink," she said. Danny held the top of his nightshirt away from his body. "Mostly all I've got is a runny nose, but Annie insisted on mustard plaster. For the first time that she heard me cough. It smelled like things about to burn a hole in my chest." Peg studied Danny. "She's probably right. Your nose is red, and you've left soggy handkerchiefs. Ugh, all over the floor. Why'd you go on that rainstorm if you didn't have to?" Danny didn't answer. He listened intently, his eyes on the hall, and then whispered, "Peg, close the door and be quiet about it. There's something I've got to tell you." Peg did as Danny said, and returned to perch on the foot of his bed. She wasn't used to seeing such deep concern in Danny's eyes, and it frightened her a little. "What's the matter?" she asked. Bluntly, Danny said, "You're Miss Hennessy's brother-in-law. Mr. Parker was shot in the arm." "I know that. It's why Miss Hennessy came today, to visit the Parkers. Mr. Parker was set upon by robber, and he managed to get away, made it home by himself. He's already improving." "There you go, getting prissy again," Danny complained. You don't know everything. "Did Miss Hennessy tell you the story about the robber?" "Yes, it's not a story. It's what really happened." "I don't think so, Peg," Danny said. "What are you talking about?" "Tell me exactly what Miss Hennessy said, and then I'll explain what I mean." "All right." Peg thought hard, trying to remember the exact words before she answered. "Lewis was shot in the right arm, but it was a clean wound. It didn't break the bone." "Where'd it happen?" "South of here, near the Kansas border." Peg hesitated. "I asked if he was shot by Quantrill. Miss Hennessy said he wasn't." "That's a strange question. Why'd you happen to ask that?" "Because John Murphy had read to us about Quantrill's men getting together near the Kansas border and riding south, head for Texas." Danny frowned. "I read that too. Do you know the rest?" "Yes," Peg said. "I know Quantrill and his raiders stopped to attack a fort, but they didn't win, so they attacked a general and his wagon train, and then went on to kill some Indians and Negroes who were rounding up ponies for the Union Army." "How'd Quantrill know the wagon train was coming?" "Someone told him, I guess." Peg frowned. "And somebody here should have told the Union general where Quantrill's men are." "It looks like the Confederates had spies and the Federals didn't." "It's not fair," Peg huffed. "It's never gonna be," Danny answered. Peg suddenly remembered what Danny had said earlier. "You didn't tell me what you meant. You said that the story about a robbery was just a story." "At least some of it, maybe all of it." "Why? Pay attention, and I'll tell you. I was near the River Road on Thursday, rounded up 2 stray cows before the storm broke, and I saw Mr. Parker ride home. Another man rode with him, which was lucky for Mr. Parker, I guess, because Mr. Parker was all bent over and looked something terrible. Miss Hennessy said he made it home alone." He didn't. I followed him. That's how I got the stupid cough. Danny blew his nose and said, besides, Mr. Parker went to southern Missouri, near the Kansas border. It was more than a day's ride. He had to spend the night somewhere and get a doctor's help for his arm. Maybe Miss Parker's didn't tell enough in her letter. That's not Miss Hennessy's fault. It's the same story that was given out in the neighbors. You're just making excuses for her, Peg. Danny reached for a clean handkerchief and blew it against his nose. And you're lying here in bed with that nothing to do but make up ridiculous stories. I know Miss Hennessy better than you do, and she... Peg stopped abruptly as the picture of James, Miss Hennessy's cousin, rose vividly in her mind. She what? Danny asked. Peg stammered out the story about James and then burst into tears. But she tried to convince him he's wrong. She saw Miss Hennessy is loyal to the Union. She told me she is. By the time Peg had pulled herself together, wiping her eyes in the corner of Danny's bedspread, because the handkerchief of her own wasn't handy, she startled to see Danny had tossed his nightshirt and mustard plaster on the floor and was getting fully dressed. You're not supposed to be out of bed, Peg protested. Told you, I'm all right, Danny said. Get your coat. Where are we going? To visit the Parkers. You think they're spies, don't you? Well, they're not, Peg shot back. I didn't say they were spies. Just because Mr. Parker was shot doesn't mean he was contacting Quantrill. Danny, you know there are plenty of bushwhackers who robbed and killed innocent people, and I believe Mr. Parker's story of being robbed. All of it? Well, Peg, think about what you told me. Haven't you wondered, while Miss Hennessy explained, if she was telling the truth? Yes, Peg admitted, but her answers made sense. They were believable. Danny put his hands on Peg's shoulders and looked into her eyes. They are believable because you wanted to believe, didn't you? She brings me here to visit you, Danny. Peg flung her arms around her brother and clung to him. I want to come. I miss you. I miss you too, and I'm glad you're here, but we need to find out as much as we can about them. Peg groaned. Why? Peg, remember, we're at war. Think about what would happen to our country if the Confederates win. Would you like it better if I told Annie and Alfred what I suspect? No. Peg vigorously shook her head. You can't tell anyone, Danny. You know what's been going on in the southern Missouri, and the military patrols don't ask questions or look for truth. If they heard of any suspicion, they just arrest them, Miss Hennessy too. Then let's you and me find out the truth. Peg hung back, scowling at Danny, and grabbed his hand. We can't, she said. It's cold outside, and you'll get sicker if you go out. Danny opened the chest beside his bed, scouring the stack of clean handkerchiefs on it, and pulled out a nightcap and a scarf. He tugged the hat over his ears and said, Now you satisfied? And he won't be. He whipped the scarf around his neck, and he doesn't have to know. She's in the kitchen making sweet potato pies, and Gussie's there to lend a hand. Exasperated, Peg stomped out the door and threw it open. All right, Danny, she said, I'll get my coat, and I'll go with you to visit the Parkers, because I want to prove to you that you're wrong, wrong, wrong. With the softest footsteps, they crept downstairs and left the house to the front door. Circling the house, they made their way to the barn. Do you mind riding bareback? Danny asked. No, Peg said. She climbed halfway up the side of the stall and swung her left leg onto Flash's broad back. Danny put the bridle and reins over Flash's head while Peg leaned down to stroke his neck. He's older and quieter, she said, remembering how smartly Flash and Fury had once stepped out as they pulled the Swensons' buggy. Maybe he's been lonely since Fury died, Danny said. He opened the stall door and, reins in hand, climbed onto the horse in front of Peg. Hang on to me, he said. Peg wrapped her arms around his waist and relaxed, adjusting to Flash's rolling movements. They were quiet as they rode away from the Swensons' house, expecting Annie to rush outside at any moment, demanding to know where they were off to, and why Danny thought he was going out with a chill in the air. But no one noticed them, and soon they were on River Road, taking the turn to the Parkers' house. The closer they came, the more apprehensive Peg grew. I think this is a terrible idea, she complained. I don't know what to say or what to do. Stop worrying, Danny said. We just decided to pay a call and see how Mr. Parker's faring. It's as simple as that. After they tell you he was shot, will you believe them? I don't know, Danny said. I hope so. When they arrived at the Parkers' house, a large mottled grayed horse was tied to the hitching post. They've got company, Peg said. Maybe we better not go in. They'll have already heard us, Danny answered. He jumped off Flash and tied him to the post and reached to help Peg down. I wonder if it's the man I saw riding with Mr. Parker. Was he a neighbor? You recognize him? No, he wasn't from around here. I'd never seen him before. Do you remember what he looked like? Yeah, no beard or mustache, and long. Good morning. Peg looked up to see Mrs. Parker in the open doorway, a warm smile on her face. Morning, ma'am, Danny said quickly. We were just coming to see how Mr. Parker's doing. He's recovering nicely, Mrs. Parker said. She glanced over her shoulder at the parlor before she asked, Won't you two come in? How about a tea and muffin or two? Thank you, Peg said, hoping she didn't look as guilty as she felt. She trotted up the stairs to the front porch and submitted to Mrs. Parker's energetic hug, but Danny edged around Mrs. Parker at a safe distance as he entered the house. Mrs. Parker led them past the parlor, which was empty except for the furniture the Millers had left behind. Come into the kitchen. It's warmer. You'll find Violet there. Peg thought she heard the back door close as they approached, but Miss Hennessy sat alone on the worn wooden table, gazing at them over her teacup as though nothing could possibly disrupt her quiet, lazy morning. They came to ask about Louis, Mrs. Parker said. Isn't that thoughtful? Miss Hennessy beamed affectionately at Peg and then turned and smiled at Danny. Sit down, please, she said. Nellie has baked the most delicious muffins. Neither Peg nor Danny had to be asked twice. The muffins were delicious, though Peg nearly choked on hers as Danny bluntly asked, "May we see Mr. Parker?" "He'll be joining us soon," Miss Hennessy said. "He's recovering nicely. The fever's completely gone." "I'm glad," Peg said. "You were so sad and worried about him." "Worried about me?" Mr. Parker came into the room and sat at the table with the others. He wore a loose collarless shirt that fit snugly over the bulge of the bandage around his upper right arm. "There was no need to worry. I come from Hardy's stock." He smiled at Danny. "You must be Miss Kelly's brother. I've heard many fine things about you." Danny automatically reached out a hand and looked embarrassed when Mr. Parker extended his left one instead of his right. "Sorry you were shot," Danny said. Peg winced as he added, "Peg didn't know the whole story of what happened to you. And if you don't mind, sir, I'd like to hear it too." "Not much to tell," Mr. Parker answered. "I'd ridden south to Butler. I'd planned to go even further to see someone about purchasing some livestock." "Quite a ways to go for livestock," Danny interrupted. "The owner's a friend. He offered me a good price." "Livestock?" Peg wondered. "Why, their stay here is supposed to be temporary?" Mr. Parker went on as though Danny's statement was of no importance, but Peg could sense a tension in the room. Both Mrs. Parker and Miss Hennessy were listening intently. "I had no warning. I was riding through some pretty desolate country when I heard a crack of a rifle and the bullet slammed in my arm." "Who shot you? Did you see him?" "It was just one man. I was so startled I took time to turn and look, and there he was, riding toward me from a grove of trees." "Oh!" Peg cried, and squeezed her fingers together, vividly imagining the pain and fear that Mr. Parker must have known. "My horse is sturdy and fast, so fortunately I was able to outrun my attacker. Found help on the farm near Butler, and after my wound was cleaned and bandaged, I rode on home." "Alone?" "Alone." From the corner of her eyes, Peg saw Danny turn and look at her, but she refused to meet his glance. Mr. Parker looked from Danny to Peg and added, "As I said, I was alone, except that as I approached River Road, I met an acquaintance who saw my plight. I was in and accompanied me to the house." This time Peg, with a flash of triumph, did meet Danny's eyes. That certainly explained what he had seen, and should have ended his suspicions once and for all. But Danny didn't give up. "Weren't you afraid of running into Quantrill?" he said. "He and his raiders were in those parts." Mrs. Parker broke in. "Everyone's afraid of Quantrill." Peg was startled into a deep sorrow in her eyes. It was a mirror of Miss Hennessy's expression as she was puzzled. Well, here was Louis Parker safe and sound, with his wound healing well. Shouldn't that make them happy? Mrs. Parker got to her feet. "I'm going to wrap up some of the muffins for you to take to Mrs. Swenson," she said. "Louis needs his rest, although I know he enjoyed your visit. We all did." She left, no doubt they were being dismissed, so Peg and Danny rose, accepted the muffins with thanks, and wished Mr. Parker a complete and successful recovery. As they climbed on Flash's back, Peg couldn't resist whispering, "Mr. Parker was telling the truth. See how wrong you were?" "I see things you don't see," Danny retorted. "Like what?" He waited till they left the Parker's house behind and were back on River Road before he answered, "Like the horse." "What horse?" "The horse that was tied to the hitching post when we arrived." "Oh," Peg was surprised. "I forgot about the horse. Didn't you hear the back door close before we entered the kitchen? Someone left the house in a hurry when we arrived. Someone who didn't want us to know he was there." Peg took a deep breath. She could hear the determination in her voice and said, "Then we haven't a choice. Somehow we'll need to find out who he was and why he was there."